Promo Insiders, the ASI Media podcast that covers the issue that matters most to the promotional products industry. I'm Teresa Hagel for ASI, and today we have a topic that stands to affect every distributor in the industry: scams. So there's been a rash of scam attempts aimed at distributors of late, and my colleague Chris Ruvo, who's our guest today, he's been reporting on this extensively, talking about all the different cons and things that have been happening. So he's here to tell us about what's going on and how distributors can protect themselves. So Chris, thanks so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Teresa.
And of course, this is a live, so if you guys have questions while we're talking, please feel free to type them into the chat and we'll get to them as we have time. But let's just get started. So what is the word on scams? What evidence is there that they are proliferating?
So quite a bit. And the short answer is we've just been receiving a rash, I think you could say, a rash of reports from distributors throughout the industry on all different parts of the country that they're being targeted with these particular types of scams, namely criminals posing as legitimate buyers, actual real people who work for actual real companies or education institutions, trying to get large quantity of products sent to them and then never actually paying for them. I want to say the first report of this came a few weeks ago from a distributor, and after we kind of put that initial report out, we were contacted, through social media, through email, through phone calls by distributors all over saying, hey, we experienced, similar things, and we either got, unfortunately, conned, or we were able to identify it. But the fact of the matter is there was this outpouring of people saying that they were, or industry companies saying that they were being targeted.
Yeah. So have the scams been successful? Have distributors actually been conned?
Yes, unfortunately, certainly not in every case, but there's been some very high profile, unfortunate examples. In one instance, there was a distributor in the South who thought they were doing business with Tarleton State University, that's in Texas. And they had actually had this university as a client, so they really did not have a lot of cause to suspect that this was, criminals targeting them. Anyway, they were ultimately taken for about $70,000. There was another distributor based in the Midwest, very similar scenario, except this time they thought that they were dealing with a utility company down in Florida, and ultimately ended shipping out about $60,000 worth of sound bars to this and being out that money.
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously there's been a rash of new cases, but scam attempts directed at promo are nothing new, right? So what makes things different this time around?
So I think what makes it different, and this isn't, this isn't our supposition, this is what we're hearing from folks in the industry, is that it seems like these scammers are organized, that it's not, it may sound a little dramatic, but it's actually a racket, that it it meets the definition of racketeering, that there's an organized group and or groups that are specifically targeting our industry, and they've gotten more sophisticated in how they target our industry. They've gotten better at posing as legitimate buyers. They know a lot of our buying processes. They know about purchase orders, and they know about credit references, and they know how to pose fairly well as actual real buyers in the real world. And because of that level of organization, and because of that sophistication that they're now exhibiting, that's different than maybe in the past where you got an email and it was like, hi, please send me, 150,000, power banks or whatever it might be. Send to this address. Here's my billing information. You can more readily identify those things as scams. These have much more of a veneer of validity to them.
Yeah, they've done some homework, it looks like, to know, because I mean, if they're actually finding the person who would be the person purchasing promo products from various organizations. So
yes.
And posing as them. So it's not like it's just a random person saying, oh yeah, I'm from Ohio State, send me this stuff. And I think another thing you had mentioned, if I'm recalling from the stories you wrote, was that they will ask for some branded stuff too, which is unusual, because usually, if it was just a bunch of blanks they're asking for, that raises a red flag. But if they're asking for things with the logo on it, that can sort of muddy the waters a little.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. That a lot of times in the past, when these people who are trying to get stuff to sell on the black market, they would ask for blanks because the blanks are less traceable, number one, and then number two, just easier to sell and on that black market. But now they have they're asking for branded product as well, and that seems to set off large alarm bells. Maybe if you got an order for, hey, I want 50,000 speakers blank, you might be a little suspicious about that. But if it's 50,000 and it's from somebody who's saying they're a buyer for a university, and they have and that person actually is who they're impersonating actually is a real buyer, and they're saying they want it branded, and they're sending you vector art and things like that, it really does seem like it's legit.
Yeah, yeah. So is there a typical formula to the scams? I think we've talked about this a little already, but are there patterns that people can look out for?
Yeah, I think I think the pattern that we've seen recently is they're finding real people, as we've said a few times, who actually work for certain companies or for educational institutions, usually colleges. They're then doctoring up an email address that looks very similar to the actual person's email address. They're then making these requests usually for large quantities of product. It has often been technology products, like say like speakers or something like that, but not just. It's also been mugs in one instance, or drinkware that they wanted as well. So it's this posing as a real buyer from a real institution, spoofing the email address, making it look like a real one, and then really trying to move forward looking like they are that buyer through things like submitting a purchase order. Although upon closer inspection, you find out the purchase order is not actually what that company would, or an educational institution would, provide as a purchase order. So things like that make it harder to identify, but that's been the pattern. I'll give you just one, for instance. In this case, thankfully, the distributor was not scammed, but there's a buyer at not Ohio State, but Ohio University, Michael Pidcock. He's a real human being who really works in purchasing for Ohio University. And these scammers have seized his name, and they've been using it to target various distributors. So it's just it's scary because it's harder to pick out because these are real people.
So, I mean, what are some things distributors can do to keep from getting victimized? And what are some other like red flags that they can kind of look for to weed out these bad actors?
Yeah. So some of them, I think just based on what we said, you probably can infer some of it already, right? Like, so number one is you want to pay extremely close attention to the email address. If the email, you want to take that email. So if it's a new client request, go online, go to the actual, company or school's website, try to find this person's actual real email address on there. And if you can find their phone number, even better, and then contact them directly through that official address to confirm that they have in fact contacted you. Because if it's legitimate, then they're going to get back to you and say, "Oh yeah, that was me." If not, they're going to tell you no. You could also even go kind of above them. You could try to confirm with a corporate office, or another purchasing person at the university, that somebody is actually who they say they are, and that this request is out there. So those are some of the things you could do. As far, if you can nip it in the bud at the email stage, that's probably that's probably the best thing to do. But still, there's other things you could do as well. So like, and I'm just bringing up some of my notes here. Bear with me half a second. Like they'll send now. They've gotten so sophisticated. I mentioned that they'll send credit references as well. And a lot of distributors, this is a new client, it's a large prospect, they're maybe understaffed or extremely busy and stretched. You're not necessarily always checking those credit references as you probably should. Do that. Actually
Right.
take that. Yeah, actually take the step to, if they've actually gone so far as to send you credit references, check them and look into them to make sure that they're actually legitimate. So that'd be another kind of big thing. We mentioned that branded products are being requested too. So don't have a false sense of security. Don't think that, oh, well, they're actually they've provided me with this vector art and they want branded products. How could this possibly, be a scam? Scammers wouldn't want that. Well, in fact, in cases now they do. So be sure to be aware of that. Another thing too is and this is where it gets really tricky, is that some of these scammers they may have obtained vendor lists. Okay, so they may have obtained a university or organization's vendor list. So they're actually going through that and contacting vendors on that list because they know that you have a pre-existing relationship with that particular institution, and that you therefore may be less apt to see something as a scam. So a big way you could potentially detect a scam is if you've worked with a buyer in the past and suddenly this buyer is contacting you from a new email address and or with a new phone number. That should set off a little alarm bell, and you should go back, find whatever your previous contact information was for them, and contact what should then be the legitimate buyer. And that would be a quick way of kind of picking this off as well. So many other things you could do. Due diligence on purchase orders. They are now submitting in cases actual real purchase orders. However, they'll put like names, like different sign-offs on it, and in some cases it will actually be other people that work at the institution that have supposedly signed off. But in some cases, there are names on there that have no connection with an institution or a company. So that could be a huge red flag. If you've looked up, you say, hey, this person signed off on this purchase order, but I went through it at LinkedIn, I went through the company website, I can't identify this person. That could be a red flag as well. Another thing is if it's a matter of you've worked with a particular client in the past, you might want to go back to previous purchase orders that you have from them and compare it to the purchase order you've now gotten on this new request. And if they're different in some way, then that should raise a red flag too. And at that point, you should contact, that buyer, that client through the older information you have from them, if you haven't already done so, to then find out if this is legitimate. So those are all big things. I will add, and I know I'm going on a bit here, Therese, but there's so much with this, and I think it's such an important issue for people in our industry, is if you can take it out of email and actually have phone conversations at some point too. I think that could be helpful in potentially identifying red flags. And then lastly, you really want to make sure, this is more for the executives out there, that the insurance that you carry for your company would cover frauds like this. So in the case of the one distributor who was out $60,000, their insurance company said they're not going to cover this. They said the goods were not taken from a warehouse, and the particular type of coverage that they had did not cover the theft. So they're out that money.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, at ASI, of course, we get, fraud, like phishing training, like
Sure.
every few months. So it would seem to me that distributors could maybe incorporate these like fraud techniques, to identify fraud, and incorporate that into their, phishing training or whatever kind of like cybersecurity training that their employees are getting or should be getting if they're not.
You're 100% correct. Like, just if most companies are, like you say, are doing smart things with where it comes to, hey, don't click on this is a suspicious file, this is a suspicious email, don't click on that. You're going to launch malware that cripples our system, which is happening at greater rates too in our industry, but that's a whole other discussion. But as you get training for those kind of things, you should also be training sales reps, people in purchasing, people in credit and collections, how to identify these types of scams.
And so much of it is playing on your psychology too, because you get very excited. You're getting a big order, like, oh, this is, this is awesome. I want to, make some money. I want to like do this for my company. But then that kind of shuts some like parts of your brain off that should be, looking for red flags.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So is there anything that suppliers can do to help with this situation?
Yeah, I think that obviously, if there's an order for a large quantity of blanks, even though we know that they're ordering branded products too, that should be a huge red flag, and the supplier should at least maybe bump the distributor a little bit and say, hey, are you sure that this is a legitimate thing? You really, these scams do exist, because even though we've been reporting on it and other media outlets in our industry have, and people in our industry are certainly aware and talking amongst themselves and social media, et cetera, on this, not everybody is aware that this is going on. So like if you have your actual supplier partner saying, hey, are you sure that this is a legitimate request? That could be helpful. Excuse me. I think another thing too just along similar lines, where the supplier is, if they've had experiences with certain types of products that have been requested at certain type of quantities, being attached to ripoffs basically in the past, it might, even if they are branded, you might, in the new request, it could be helpful to just say to the distributor, be aware that these things are happening. Another thing is that the suppliers can almost act similar to what we do, where we're trying to get information out to the industry. Suppliers are in routine communication, either through emails or marketing, newsletters they might do with their distributors. Go ahead and share ASI's content on this, or if they're so inclined, create their own to talk about their own experiences, just help educate distributors that these things are out there. And in the long run, that helps indemnify the whole industry a little bit against fraud.
Right. Because you could think, oh, this is just a distributor problem, but it affects everyone.
I mean, it totally does, because for instance, thankfully some of these distributors that we're taking advantage of are in fairly strong financial positions, and as much as they don't want to absorb it, they're capable of. If you're a small like super small mom and pop shop, you might an $80,000, $100,000 hit, it could be devastating. And now that supplier doesn't have you as a customer anymore. So it really does. It really does hurt the whole industry if these things are allowed to proliferate.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for talking with us today about scams, and hopefully everybody learned something and won't get scammed again.
Yeah. All right, Teresa. Thank you so much.